On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, helping people get free from debt one court filing at a time. So, welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Shawn Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I am joined again remotely by your financial coach, George Corbello. How you doing, George?
Your Honor, I'm doing okay. And now I'm doing fine. Shawn, how's it going with you, buddy?
Good, good. As soon as we're done recording, we've got school open houses to go attend.
Nice.
So as soon as we're done recording here, I've got to drive. This is the 1 year that both boys are going to be at the same school uh,
Oh, that's
until
exciting.
until what, like 3 years from now, where they're both together again in high school. But for now, I got my youngest one going into middle school and my oldest one in his last year of middle school. So they'll be in the same place for 1 year.
Nice. I had that when the girls were young too, and it's fun. It's easier because you get to drive them both to the same location, so that's always good. But yeah, that's great, man. I have my olders that I'm kicking them out. Like go do something. School's a good time for you to do something because I feel like they sleep late, right? They get up late, and it's still hard for me to get them to empty the dishwasher. Like, come on, guys, like really help around the house, would ya? But anyway, doing good, man. As you can tell, I'm still keeping my sanity even during these summer months.
Yeah, no, I got to get mine to help around the house more as well. Unload the dishwasher, make the beds, do the laundry.
Simple things.
Yeah, simple. We'll start with the little things. We'll get to the more complicated things later. But yeah, George, you are surrounded by attorneys today.
Yeah, I'm a little outnumbered today, but I think I'm up for the challenge because I get that. I think I'm going to learn something today.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. So I do want to introduce our guest. He is a bankruptcy attorney like me. He is up in Massachusetts. He's a graduate of New England Law Boston, formerly the New England School of Law. He's acted as outside counsel to a number of small businesses and a variety of endeavors, along with individuals experiencing financial difficulty. He's experienced in corporate work, the drafting of legal agreements and real estate transactions. He's represented hundreds of individuals, successfully shepherded them through their difficult financial times to see them get back on the road to financial well being.
Wow, who
Uh,
is that guy?
who is this guy?
Hey,
So
George, I
we,
just wanted to say you're also not only surrounded by attorneys, you're surrounded by MOTs, which means members of the tribe.
There
So
you go. There you go.
we'll let you sit here for a bit.
there you go, which should be obvious when I introduce our guest, Barry Levine. Welcome, Barry.
Good morning. How's everybody? I'm doing great. It's Friday.
Absolutely. So you are up there in lovely Massachusetts, right?
Well, I'm originally from Brooklyn, if you can't tell, but
There
I've
you
been
go.
living
Little
up here.
Brooklyn.
I've been living up here for almost since 1977. Still can't get a good corned beef or pastrami sandwich. Uh, but yes, my office is in Beverly, the birthplace of the American Navy, actually, if you want a little bit of history.
Wow, very cool.
I think they still keep that boat out there in the water.
That is okay. Well,
So
and I feel you, Barry. Trying to find the right. I haven't been able to find any of that in Florida, so I feel your pain from anything New York style.
Well,
Still looking.
Florida though has like what is it, two J's, three J's, all those places in Fort Lauderdale that aren't bad.
There you go. All right, so just
well,
got to travel from Tampa. That's all.
Yeah, no,
that's if you
Tampa's tough.
yeah,
Same
that's if
place,
you go
but
down to Fort Lauderdale. There was a two J's up here in Tampa and in Clearwater, but I think they all closed.
Yep.
Now we have McAllister's Deli, I think is the closest thing, but
no,
even they're kind of lacking.
something named McAllister's doesn't do anything for me.
No, no, and they are kind of lacking. So, but I don't know that we really want you. I mean, I'd love to sit here and talk about, pastrami and bagels and lox and all that kind of stuff, but I think our listeners would want us to talk more about bankruptcy and
Sure,
debt. So,
absolutely.
George has grilled me before about different aspects of bankruptcy law. So hopefully we can get some information out of you. I think maybe where I wanted to start is what I think a lot of people don't realize, and we talked about it a little bit before the show. I'm here in Florida, you're up in Massachusetts. A bankruptcy here in Florida does not work the same as a bankruptcy up in Massachusetts. So, one of the things that drives me crazy is when a potential client or a client will say to me, well, my brother did a bankruptcy and blah, blah, blah happened. And you got to kind of temper those expectations, and who was the judge and who was the trustee and where was it and all those other issues. So what is bankruptcy like in Massachusetts? How is it? How
You
easy? How
know,
difficult?
I find it, I don't want to give away trade secrets, but I find that, the Chapter 7, most cases are assetless cases, and most trustees for their $65 aren't going to spend a lot of time. I mean, if and I'm sure, going in, if you provide a trustee with everything they need, generally the wait to be heard at the 341 meeting takes longer than the meeting itself. I think probably the differences are, and it's the same way I don't do state court work. And, somebody who does a lot of state court work goes in and says, hi to the clerk and hi to this one and that one. I go in, I'm a foreigner. In the bankruptcy court, I know what's going on. I mean, I know the people, I know the trustees, I know who's going to give me a hard time, maybe who isn't going to give me a hard time. The differences, though, are more in the mechanics, the homestead we were talking about, certain things. I mean, I don't, I'm trying to think. I think I told you about the Florida case, but, here, like when we list assets, we don't list specific things. We just list they have $5,000 worth of furniture. The only time we get specific is, the question in the schedules that asks about electronics and things like that. Though I don't mention dildos, nobody needs to know. uh, that's what I love about bankruptcy. I can be me.
Yeah. What I've told clients is we don't necessarily need to list, you have couch model XYZ and coffee table from blah, blah, blah manufacturer. What I tell them is let's list all the stuff. So you got a couch, you got a love seat, you got a coffee table, but that's about as specific.
No, we don't actually have a case now. It's an elderly couple that jerked some creditors around in litigation for several years and pissed off the attorneys. And we filed a bankruptcy, and the creditors objected to the value of their house and the value of their personal property, and not to mention the value of a set of golf clubs. And I was talking to the trustee about it, and these attorneys don't do bankruptcy work. And he said to me, Barry, if there's a $5,000 difference, they have to convince me more than that. It's not worth doing anything about. All comes, in the bankruptcy business for a trustee, it must be the same in Florida. It all comes down to dollars and cents for them. If it's an assetless case, they're not going to chase ghosts.
Right. Well, and I've said that to clients as well, that the Chapter 7 trustees make their money based on what assets they can turn into cash. And so if we can show the trustee, and especially when we talk about the value of a couch and a love seat, you know, okay, I know that technically the bankruptcy code says you have to value that stuff at replacement value, but if this is a 15-year-old couch that's got,
Right.
spit up and dirt and dog and whatever, and you say to the trustee, yeah, that couch will be $2,000 to replace, but if you think my couch is worth $2,000, congratulations, trustee, you got yourself a new couch.
Buy it.
They're not gonna sell it for 2 grand.
Well, years ago, it was a big controversy up here. I don't know if they ever did it down there. Sears used to encourage people, when Sears existed, to reaffirm their credit card debt. And because most people don't realize, and George, most people, when they use their credit cards, may not know that they're granting the vendor a purchase money security interest in the piece of dreck they're buying. And Sears did that all the time. People would buy a refrigerator. They'd find out when they filed bankruptcy that Sears had a lien on it. And Sears had a nice old man. He was retired. He used to show up at the 341 meetings, and he would tell people how, Sears is such a great company and they needed the credit card. And the response was, the refrigerator is 10 years old. You want to come pick it up? Have a nice day. They never did. I mean,
Yeah.
what's it worth? You know, it's it. It's one thing I'll tell you, I have a guy who's in a Chapter 7, which is a case for another day. He has 1,807 Bitcoin,
Ooh,
and he's in a Chapter 7. Don't ask, but that's an interesting case. A trustee is going to make some money there.
right.
But by and large, if tchotchkes and stuff like that, where's there to make money? I don't know if Shawn's mother collects, but my mother used to collect all sorts of dreck, Hibbles and Yadros, and I had to get rid of them. Nobody wants them.
Right.
Has no
I, I
value.
I've told this I think I've told this story on the show before as well. I had a trustee once. My client had a baseball card collection. And so the trustee said, "Oh, I'm going to send my appraiser, have the cards at your office. The appraiser is going to value them." Well, I do a little bit of card collecting. I know something about it. And so I looked through the card collection before the appraiser got there. And I said, when the appraiser got there, I said, I looked through it. There's no big name players. There's
No Mickey Mantle rookie cards.
no rookie cards. There's no, a lot of the cards have been dented, or, none of the cards are in mint condition. They're in some 3-ring binder in a little thing, whatever. I said, but, and the appraiser gets all uppity and I'll be the judge of what it's worth. Fine, fine, man. Here are the binders. Enjoy. The appraiser was in the conference room for maybe 10 minutes, and he comes walking out. There's no rookies, there's no players of any note. The cards are all damn, there's no value here. And I'm like, is there an echo? What, isn't this what I was trying to tell you? But I want to back up because I do have a question for you. So for those listening that don't really know the bankruptcy lingo, a reaffirmation agreement, typically when you have a secured debt, so a house, a car, maybe Sears, who knows, um, the bankruptcy eliminates the note. It eliminates the obligation to repay the money, but it doesn't eliminate the lien. It doesn't eliminate the security agreement. So
Explain that to people.
right. So if you want to keep your car, if you want to keep your house and you're in a Chapter 7, you typically have to reaffirm your obligation to pay despite the fact that there's a bankruptcy. In other words, you're putting yourself back on the hook to pay the note despite the fact that the bankruptcy was filed. There's a lot of discussion and debate internally. I say you always reaffirm a mortgage if you want to keep your house,
Right.
but there's a little bit of debate on whether you should reaffirm a car or not. There's even down
I,
here in Tampa, I think there's a split on whether we
I
reaffirm cars.
I look at the value of the car. I mean, nowadays, because of people younger than all of us, the car dealers will take these kids who have cars who have no equity in them, but you want to get into this fancy new
You
car,
want the
so
new
we'll
one,
take the
right?
deficiency from this piece of dreck and we'll add it to the new car that you're buying. So they're driving a $15,000 car that's encumbered by a $45,000 loan. I will never let them reaffirm the debt. And they have it here. We call it pay and retain. You just keep making the payments because they generally don't want to take the car. The same way, if it's the end of a lease, I won't have them reaffirm the lease because they can always be hooked into all those lease end charges by not reaffirming it. Here's the last payment. Have a nice day. And the big problem, though, on the other hand, with not reaffirming debts, and this is one of the reasons why I keep Kafka on my desk, is if you don't reaffirm. I had a client a number of years ago, the meltdown, he had a computer company and he had a house. The computer company was gone. He had a house in not a particularly great city in Massachusetts, was encumbered up the wazoo. He was earning no money, no equity. A court wasn't going to let him reaffirm the debt. However, over 10 years, he made all the mortgage payments. And when the mortgage rates dropped, he went to his bank to refinance the debt. And they said to him, because you didn't reaffirm the debt, this mortgage was discharged in your bankruptcy. So it was as if he had never made 10 years worth of payments.
but he
Man.
still should have gotten credit for paying down the
But
mortgage.
the thing is, not to blow I had drafted a statute in Massachusetts that would require the creditor to at least report the payments. They don't even record the payments made.
Wow.
But of course the legislature had better things to do than deal with my statute. But because to me it's explained to them he made 10 years worth of payments. My mortgage was discharged. And I don't
I,
know the other thing that's happening a lot of times, and I don't know if you've experienced it with reaffirmations because a mortgage is a mortgage is a mortgage. Um, I've had people they've come to me 10, 11 years, 12 years later, they filed a bankruptcy with somebody in 2010. There was a second mortgage on their house. They never reaffirmed it. They never paid it. They hadn't heard from the mortgage company in 12 years, and now they want 12 years worth of payments.
yep.
And it's like, well, first off, it was never discharged. Yeah, you discharged the note like we were talking about, but the mortgage is still there. And 9 times we filed Chapter 13s. It's because some of these mortgage holders have been nice. They haven't looked for 12 years worth of interest. Others of them want 12 years worth of interest. So what's a $90,000 mortgage over 12 years at 8% interest? It's I don't know if that's happening down in Florida, but here
Yeah.
the other thing is people who have ignored judgments. Um, the bottom feeders out there, there used to be a website that if I wanted to buy debt, you could buy debt in any state for 10 cents on the dollar, as much as you wanted. And these people are buying these judgment creditors. And now, because the judgment in Massachusetts is generally good for 20 years, they're looking to enforce them. And there's no defense to a judgment that ended 12 years ago, excusable neglect. And
Yeah.
again, it's either pay them money or file a bankruptcy. It's a very, and people forget. I mean, they don't remember.
Yeah, that happens here in Florida all the time, both of those scenarios. But sometimes the bank will come back and say, because you didn't reaffirm the debt, we're not going to modify your loan. We're not going to
Oh, okay.
look at a refinance of your loan. They're not going to do any of that because you didn't reaffirm it. Now, here, the creditors send us the reaffirmation agreements. We help the debtor fill them out. We help the debtor sign them, and then our judges here in the Middle District in Tampa, Florida's 3 districts: Northern, Middle, Southern,
Hmm.
and here in the Middle District, our judges like for us to contact the creditors and say, hey, look, we want to reaffirm your debt, but we noticed that your interest rate is 400%. Can we lower that? We noticed that your monthly payments are this. Can we do it? And we kind
They
of
respond
mini
positively.
we kind I haven't had a car creditor yet say, okay, yeah, we'll do that. We'll drop the interest. We'll cut this. We'll drop that. We'll do this. But the judges always like us to try, so we do.
Why not spend more time for your very large fee that you're getting for a Chapter 7?
Exactly. But that's hey, if that's I've told my staff numerous times, if the judge says you need to be doing a headstand while you file this pleading, then do it. I don't care if that's what the judge wants. That's what we're going to do.
Also, how have you dealt with student loans by you under the new guidelines that they've instituted?
I haven't done any of them yet. I am familiar with them with
I've actually had a few cases where the loans have been totally discharged.
nice
It's
where you
it's
where you negotiate with the Department of Justice
Well, no, it's
brand
really
and
it's really a different process. I mean, I can again giving away that I can send you the information on a little app that I have. And when you file a Chapter 7, you put all of the debtor's information into this app. And I don't know what the charge is to run it. It's like when you do the means test, it
right,
runs
right.
around and figures something out, and it will tell you whether it's worth exploring a discharge to filing a complaint to discharge their student loans. So what has to happen is the client, excuse me, has to There's some website, I have no clue, my assistant knows, that they go to and download all their student loan information. It lists all the payments, all the loans, and all their status. You then file the complaint, and once the feds enter the picture, there's an attestation that you complete, which you fill out. It's a lot of schmaltz, and how are they not going to pay it back, and this, that, and the other thing, and then you send it in to the feds. And like I said, the two times I've done it so far, they've discharged the loans. I'm working on a third one now. Uh, and I'll send you the information if you want. It happens to be very good. Uh,
Yeah, no, that would be awesome. Thank you.
and also one that helps with tax liability discharge.
Yeah, I actually just got George. I got contacted by a friend of mine that does tax law, so that might be. And for you listeners, we may have a tax attorney on here in the next couple of weeks or months.
Well,
So be on the
don't you
lookout for
find
that.
that you encounter a lot of tax stuff in doing Chapter Sevens and stuff? People who have trust fund liability when their business went down the dumper or something like that.
Well, and the interesting thing that I find a lot is, for Chapter 13s, the tax returns have to be filed in current. For Chapter 7, they don't, but it's always a good idea to file them to cap the
Well,
liability.
here
But
we always hear from if you file a Chapter 7 with unfiled returns, you'll hear from the IRS and the DOR, also like in a Chapter 13, and they file the returns.
yeah,
I mean, and the state has hired these young go-getters who are very, aggressive, and they're like having a school, an old school teacher nudging you all the time. It's not pretty.
well, the thing that I don't understand is when someone will come to me to file a bankruptcy and I'll say, well, are your tax returns current? Whether it's a 7 or 13, I'll always ask, are your returns current? And a lot of them, I haven't filed returns in 5 years. I haven't filed returns in 3 years, in 7 years. I'm like, how do you not file? You give all your stuff to the CPA and let them do it. I
Right.
don't understand the burying your head
Well,
in the
even
sand.
doing it yourself is fairly easy nowadays. If you're a W-2 employee, I mean, it's not that big a megillah to put it all together. But no, people don't listen. It's like you must encounter when you deal with debtors, nobody likes to work. Do you use Best Case?
I do.
And do you have the online version or
I
so it
just,
enables people to upload all the
yep.
stuff? And some can do it and some can't. It's like when we do Zoom calls in 341. Is that how you do Zoom call 341 meetings by you?
Almost everything in the middle district is on Zoom. 341s, hearings, almost anything. Evidentiary hearings, they want you to be live in front of the judge. If you don't register by 3 o'clock the day before the hearing, you need to be there in person
Either.
in front
Yeah.
of the judge.
You know, I
Otherwise, everything is Zoom.
my assistant convinced me that I shouldn't wear my T-shirt, I saw Jerry. Uh when I'm up here in court. So now it was the first time in almost 4 years I've been put. In fact, I took my shirts to a cleaner today. It's been years. I wear
I
a
know
shirt tie.
the Zoom suit, the shirt, the tie, the jacket from the neck down, and shorts from the
No,
waist
like
down.
like the people who appear on the like us, people who appear on the news. You don't know what they're wearing.
Right.
Right. I actually
I got.
saw.
I have to ask you. You do any subchapter 5 cases down by you?
I have one pending right now. Yes.
What do you
Um,
think?
what do I see?
Think of it.
Think it's interesting because you don't need the creditor committee like you do in a chapter 11. So in a normal, quote, normal chapter 11. And it's actually been a little bit easier, a little bit tighter on the timelines to get stuff filed and make
Yeah.
sure we have all the proper documents in place. It is still a lot more, it's still a chapter 11, so it's a lot more difficult than a 7 or 13. It's still designed primarily for businesses, although I've had a handful of people over the years who have filed chapter 11s. But I tend to think, that we get a subchapter 5 trustee who in the
They're
particular
usually
case.
experienced bankruptcy guys.
Yeah, well, so the sub chapter 5 trustee I'm dealing with now is actually one of these turnaround guys.
Yeah, that's
So
what some of them here too.
yeah, so but he's been a tremendous help in terms of helping us negotiate with the creditors to get the plan confirmed.
Yeah, no, I have two. One, it's an interesting. He runs a franchise. He's a franchisor, and he liked to use his company as his own piggy bank.
Right.
We'll take money out and we'll put money in and we'll take money out. And the subchapter five trustee became an operating subchapter five trustee. And it hasn't been that bad. On the other hand, I have an individual who's not qualified for a Chapter 13 because she has one mortgage on a house that should be foreclosed upon. And they don't distinguish in the trustee's office between somebody who's in business and somebody who's working a full-time job.
Right.
But folks, that's just our pet peeves from doing this stuff. It's very annoying.
So I had a question I wanted to ask you as well. I normally we talk about chapter sevens. I normally do not like it when the United States trustees get involved in the cases. Now, I don't want to, that's no insult to the US trustees. It's just, it's another layer of documents that you have to provide and information, and it's just another layer of craziness. I've had the last three cases that I filed where I had to report that my client had gambling winnings and losses. The U.S. trustee has gotten involved in all three of those cases.
Well,
And I assume it's because the U.S. trustee is wanting to make sure that the debtors didn't, win a bunch of money gambling and blow it all on whatever. I
but
assume
the
that's
thing
what
is
it
that
is.
if they ever found it, it would be the first time. The thing is here, the big thing is when an individual who had a business that had a lot of SBA loans, and I mean the SBA, COVID, they've been giving loan money to everybody. And
Yeah,
a lot of those businesses have now failed. They do an inquiry into what did they do with them. They're like another arm of the government. But a
right,
lot of people don't realize that things like SBA loans are dischargeable uh,
right,
in a bankruptcy. But here, that's well, like I just had a case where they do that inquiry, which is really it's not something you're right. It's not something you want to have to deal with because they ask for 3 years worth of bank statements and this and that. And this poor woman, she and her husband were high earners. And according to best case, the software told me that she should file a Chapter 7, even though income wise, she was a Chapter 13 candidate, she and her husband. I knew she couldn't survive a 13, but I filed the Chapter 13, figuring I'd avoid that inquiry we're talking about. Does
right.
she deserve to get her discharge? Silly me. So I filed a Chapter 13 plan. She had no surplus income. The plan was $85 a month. The Chapter 13 trustee filed a motion to dismiss or something because it was not feasible. So I said, okay, not feasible in a 13. I converted it to a 7. They do their inquiry. This was a woman, her husband works for the government, makes a lot of money. She made a lot of money and she lost her job and now she's a contract employee. The job is good for 6 weeks, then she has to find another one. Unfortunately, they have 2 children who are emotionally and educationally needy. And don't ask what they spend on. They drive from a town north of Boston into New Hampshire, all over. I mean, and the trustee did this whole thing about, looking into their income and this, how they do it. You have to
Right.
justify why you're entitled to a discharge. And actually, the clients did a great job. They provided all the information, how federally they were entitled to spend all this money on their children. And the trustee's office said thank you and walked away.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the US trustee to acknowledge a similar situation in one of my cases right now. And interestingly, I filed a chapter 13 years and years and years ago, maybe 10 years ago or more. And the way the calculations worked out, our Chapter 13 payments were only like $25 a month. I mean, it was something cheap. And the Chapter 13 trustee challenged me and said, "You're not paying, it's $25 a month or whatever it is not enough money for us to do our job and administer the case." And I said, "Wait a minute, where does it say in the bankruptcy code that there is a minimum payment necessary to file a 13?" And we ended up shoving it through.
It's funny you mentioned that because back when I had a lot more hair and I was a brand new attorney, most of us must have had a lot more hair.
All of us, yeah.
I filed the Chapter 13 in Massachusetts, and I was a new bankruptcy attorney. The code said more than they would receive in a Chapter 7. They would receive zilch in a Chapter 7, so I filed a 1% plan. And at the time, the trustee was he was like my father-in-law. He was from Czechoslovakia. He spoke with an accent. He flew in the Czechoslovakian Air Force in World War II. And we're going to the 341 meeting, and he starts geschrying at me. The plan is an insult, and it's this and that, ranting and raving. I'd never seen anything like that. So after the 341 meeting, I go up to him. I said, "Joe, what's the Ganze Megillah? It's not worth his while, the 1% plan." I said, "You could have told me that in the first place." It's no problem.
But there's nowhere in the code that says in order to
Exactly.
confirm a plan, it's got to be worth the trustee's while.
Well, now around here, I mean, you can get 5 or 10% plans confirmed. It's
I've done I've done 0% plans, meaning nothing gets paid to the unsecured creditors in cases where I've needed to save a house or save a car, or, so there's been a payment to secured creditors, but there's been zero payment to the unsecured creditors,
well,
or there's been a distribution to the priority, to the IRS, to child support, to something like that,
you,
and that eats up all the money, so there's no other money that goes to the
you find
unsecured.
though, sometimes the big difficulty is telling people that you can't keep the house,
Yeah.
that it may be time to, I mean, a couple I'm representing now, their mortgage arrears is $180,000. And to keep this house would cost them about 10 grand, 12 grand a month. And for that kind of money, you can move any place. It's just a house.
Yeah.
As the boy
I,
who grew up in Brooklyn in an apartment, it was not that much to me.
no, I've had to have that conversation with clients as well. Is that, look, if you can't afford the house, I'll never forget when I was a young attorney and the mortgage meltdown had just started, and I got a client who she needed my help to save her house. So we tried to do a loan modification. That didn't work. We tried to file a bankruptcy. That didn't work. Well, the reason it didn't work, this woman was a waitress at Denny's, I think. And so making, waitress money plus tips. So she wasn't making a lot of money. There were 8 people living in her house. You want to guess how many other than her worked?
None of them.
Jeez.
Right. And so I had to tell her, listen, you got to get some of these people to start working to bring in money, or you can't afford the house. And that's when I knew that this meltdown was going to last for a while. When a waitress at Denny's can afford to buy a $500,000 house where nobody else in the house works. I mean, you know,
America's a wonderful place.
yeah,
Well,
not to insult. I love Denny's.
no doc mortgages.
Right.
My parents used to come visit when they were alive. We drive around Marblehead Neck, which is a very fancy, neighborhood. And I point to these homes and I said, Mom, I could buy that house, maybe make the first mortgage payment. They wouldn't even ask to see a document. No
Yeah.
employment, no nothing. I mean, but now people pay the price with the banks. It's like getting a colonoscopy when you go for a mortgage.
So, uh,
Yeah, times have changed.
yeah, not that I wanted to exclude you, George, but Barry
No,
and I
again,
think
I'm letting great minds go through the conversation. So you gotta let it heat up, and you guys have been heating up and cooking, so it's all good here.
Well,
oh
see, now
no,
people are going to find out what we really talk about when they leave. They should
exactly.
only
Exactly.
know.
This is the unreal portion of the consultation.
Well,
Exactly.
the big problem you have is that, people, we do a good job, but sometimes you can't do miracles. I
Right.
find myself between saying it is what it is, and I could have told you that. I mean, what are you going to say?
Well, I
Well,
think a
the
lot of times when clients come into your guys' office too, there's this expectation. There's this we all learn from TikTok and social media, right? This is how I learn how to do all these things, and then I'm supposed to tell you how to do your job
They have
coming
their
into that client as a
law
client.
degree. Well, by the way, if you want, I do open heart surgery in a back alley on weekends. I saw how to do it on
I'm a great
YouTube.
plumber on the weekend. Exactly.
Right? What's the big deal? No, it's true. Everybody says my friend did this or they heard
Correct.
that, and then like yesterday, I had and I always sound like my father, but I'm getting to be his age. Young people in yesterday for 341 meetings, and I think it took more time moving their chairs around so they were sitting behind me than the 341 meeting itself. And when they both walked out, they said, "That's it." I said, "That's it. Take the second course. You're done." And here I don't know how quickly the trustees reported as a no asset case by you, but here generally within, it's a different world. In Massachusetts, you file a case. If you would file a case today, you'd get your discharge in 4 months.
Yeah, that's Florida's about
And
the same way.
and
You,
years ago, don't ask. I mean, you could be waiting a year, and of course, you don't want to ask the clerk's office what's holding up the discharge because then it'll be another year. Now it's everything moves along. It's a different world, you
although
know.
I will tell you, and this was one of the first episodes I ever did of the podcast. I don't call the meeting the 341 meeting anymore. I call it the meeting of creditors. So, and I explained the story early in the podcast, but basically, after a bankruptcy is filed, the trustee has their opportunity to talk to the debtors about the petition. It's called the meeting of creditors. It's based on, or it's required by Section 341 of the code. That's why Barry and I and other bankruptcy people refer to it as the 341 meeting. I used to do that until I said to a client one day, "Okay, your 341 meeting is on this date," and this was back when we would go to the courthouse and meet the client and sit there physically with the trustee. And so their 341 meeting was at like 2:30, I think.
Hey,
And so I show up to the courthouse and I sit in the lobby. It's everyone's sitting there in front of the trustee. 2:30 comes and goes. The trustees schedule like three or four of these in a half-hour block. So the trustee does all the 2:30, 341s except mine, gets into the 3 o'clock 341s, and I finally interrupt him and I say, "Look, I'm sorry, I don't know where my client is. I went and looked for her. I didn't see her. I'm heading back to the office. Give me a rescheduled date." Well, about 10 after 4, quarter after 4, the client walks into my office super mad, yelling at me and how you weren't there and you didn't represent me. And I said, "Man, I'm sorry. I was literally talking to your trustee, and I was sitting there from about 2:15 until about 3:15, and I was sitting there and I went looking and I didn't see you." And she said, "Why were you there that early?" I said, "Well, your 341 was at 2:30." She said, "No, it was at 3:41 in the afternoon."
Mhm.
So I never refer to it anymore as the
and you see,
341. I
I
call it the.
can believe that. I can believe that.
So I wanted to ask you real quick because we did talk before the show about homestead and about exemptions, which can differ from
Sure.
state to state. And I know we said Florida has one of the best homestead protections in the country. What we didn't talk about was Florida has some of the worst personal property protections in the country. We've got a $1,000 wild card exemption, and if you
1,000.
and if you do not have a homestead, if you rent, in essence, that's a $5,000 wild card exemption. Our car exemption a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, so 2023 2023, I think, or 2024, our car exemption went from 1,000 up to 5,000.
Can you
What
take the federal exemptions by you or just the state?
we take state, Florida has opted out, so we take the
Oh,
state
God.
exemptions.
That because, very often, for some reason, when I use best case, it defaults to the state exemptions. And in Massachusetts, aside from the homestead, which we spoke about, the other exemptions are fairly liberal. I think it's $7,500 in a car, and if you're over 62 or elderly, it goes up to 12,500. Uh, Personal property for two debtors is 30 grand. And we even have a wild card, which you can use to the extent that you have exemptions left over on any asset of about 5 grand. So, by and large, if most people go through the bankruptcy process here, they don't miss a beat, unless they have a Picasso, in which case they would not be filing a bankruptcy, presumably. But that's, I know New York has very poor exemptions too. I've seen what they allow. Not every state, and in Massachusetts, the interesting part about the homestead is that it only used to work prospectively. And when I was a young attorney, nobody ever filed homesteads because it only protected against future creditors, not creditors you already had. And there was a judge who decided that in a bankruptcy case, that was an improper imposition on the federal laws. And at that point, everybody started recording homesteads, and the homestead exemption, like we said, is now up to $1 million.
Wow.
But it only works if you file a bankruptcy, because
Well,
there's really no process in the state. If a creditor would attach your house and you try to assert the homestead and get rid of it, there's no real process to do that.
huh.
Bankruptcy, you can avoid the lien.
So we do have a process in Florida outside of
Oh,
bankruptcy
do you?
where you can contest a lien recorded against your homestead.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, well, see,
It's
to me, that sort of makes sense because it's like, it's sort of illusory. The only way you can really take advantage of the homestead exemption is when you file bankruptcy, and then you get the $1 million. So, unless you have a really expensive house with no mortgages on it, it's not a problem.
Yeah. The other big exemption we have in Florida is a head of household wage garnishment exemption. So if you provide more than 50% of support of dependents, your wages are generally exempt from garnishment.
Oh, yeah. Here, there are exemptions, but I don't think it's not that steep. If you're the sole earner, it doesn't matter. It has to
Yeah.
do with the size of your household, and it's limited to some amount. But I don't really
Yeah.
pay attention to that stuff.
So do you do any work outside of bankruptcy court?
Well, people with bankruptcy problems also usually have problems with the IRS or the Mass Department of Revenue. I do offers in compromise with the IRS. I tell people if they owe the state money, they're better off not, because the state here in Massachusetts is annoying to deal with. They're offering settlement. For instance, you in order to do even file an offer in settlement, which is like an offer in compromise, you have to apply for two loans and get rejected.
Hmm.
Okay.
The state also, in order to become judgment proof, you have to prove it. They can't make a decision themselves. It makes no sense. And what they do here in the state, I don't know if they do it in Florida. Uh, if you owe taxes, they tend to threaten, and they do indeed suspend your driver's license. And I've had this discussion with many revenue officers. Like I mentioned, I maybe sound like it. I grew up in Brooklyn. You can live in New York and you don't need a car. You can take the bus, you can take the train, right? It's not that difficult. You live in some place in Massachusetts that the commuter rail is a myth. How are you going to get around to look for a job if you can't drive?
I did have a client one time who had some obscene auto expense number on their budget. And when I said we're going to have to justify this number to the trustee and possibly the U.S. trustee, they had been they'd lost their driver's privileges because of a DUI, and so they had to Uber everywhere. And
And
so
well,
that was the budget amount. I said, well, if we can prove you Uber everywhere, let's and it went
and
through without a hitch.
and I will say Uber
Wow.
happens to be very convenient if you're somebody who uses it. You don't even think about it.
Yeah, yeah, you just use it. So anyway, I don't know, George, do you have any other
No,
questions?
I think the only one I would say, and I think I asked you this, Sean, before, but what's the one thing, Barry, when people come to your office that they shouldn't like things they shouldn't do before they come and visit you? Like before they
Well,
see you, there's certain things that they probably should not do
well,
before they
I
come and
once
see
had
you.
somebody come to me and say, do I have to tell you about the property I own in Maine? And
You
it's
just
like, well,
did.
schmuck, now you do. I mean, I mean, the reality is, and the best sometimes years and years ago when there was a meltdown in the late '80s when all the banks, the FDIC came in and all that. I represented a gentleman there's a mill town north of Boston called Haverhill. They were going to turn all of downtown into condominiums. And he had so many pieces of property. We filed a bankruptcy. He forgot about a piece of property that he owned at some registry of deeds that, I mean, it would have to schlep there 3 hours to look this up. It wasn't like you can look online now, right?
Right.
And I got a call from the Chapter 7 trustee ranting and how could I not know this? And I said, at the time, it was like $1,500. You want me to schlep 3 hours to check at the registry of deeds? I only know what he tells me. He forgot about it. What am I going to tell you? I mean, it is what it is. I had a woman once who came to me when, Shawn knows when you ask questions about Schedule B, which is personal property, what do you have for jewelry and this, that, and the other thing. So I ask her, how much do you have in jewelry? She goes, $55,000. I say to her, the exemption, I don't even remember what it was, is you can't file bankruptcy tomorrow with, oh, no, it's only worth $2,000. I said, no, I don't think so. Go get me an appraisal. Never saw her again, but yeah, it's the sort of thing where, uh, we only know what they tell us. And I mean, as a practical matter and what I can get when I check a registry of deeds online. I mean, if they have property in Arizona, how do you find out about it if they don't tell you about it?
Right.
You
Yeah.
really have to assume, and that's a big, that most people are going to be honest with you.
I developed a checklist that I use for every due diligence checklist that I go through with every client. But you're right. I mean, I'll do an asset search in the counties where I know that they live.
Right.
But if they own property outside of the Tampa Bay area, if they own property outside of Florida, there
You have no reason to look.
I can't do a countrywide or a worldwide search for property that
I
they
tell you,
own.
the only thing I generally, I'll check registries of deeds because in the Boston area, they're for the most part online. And I also, because, some people decide to be entrepreneurs, I always check the Secretary of State's office for corporations and LLCs because the trustees often do that. And you don't want to ask a question, why didn't you list this company that's been out of business for 5 years and makes no money? It's easier to just list it and, it's not worth anything.
Right, right. Well, as we get kind of to the end of the episode, Barry, is there any war stories we didn't trade or
Right.
anything else you want to talk about?
Well, I tell you, I always talk of the Bitcoin case is going to be a movie one day, because the kid happens to be he's a good kid, uh, and the story started back in 2010. He was at a Hanukkah party with his brother, family, and he got loaded. And his brother convinced him to buy $60,000 worth of Bitcoin. And his wife who is a Greek national, found out about it, and within 24 hours, he sold the Bitcoin.
Oh,
A year later, same sort of party, he did it again. And this time he forgot completely about the Bitcoin. If you know anything about Bitcoin with the passwords and the this,
yeah.
to get into the wallet, you have to like post a paragraph from a book and all this other craziness. He forgot all about it. And he's an architect and he does a lot of building here outside of Boston. And he was going into a partnership with a guy. It didn't work out, but they had set up an LLC to do this partnership, and this erstwhile partner ran through about $35 million in his name,
Yeesh.
resulted in a identity theft lawsuit. The guy is now in jail. Uh, he had the same computer that he had, and years later, he calls in a computer guy to having some problem with his computer, and the computer guy says to him when he's leaving, "Did you ever deal with Bitcoin?" Didn't remember. Comes again a few months later to um, look at his computer, and he tells him he found 1,807 Bitcoin on his computer. Must have been the guy who stole his identity, enjoyed dabbling in Bitcoin. And then he decided that he considers himself the custodian of the Bitcoin, and he won't turn over the wallets and the codes. The poor kid had to file bankruptcy because his business went south. His wife was his partner. She developed type 1 cancer, couldn't work, and he had a problem with his mortgage company. They were going to foreclose. Had to file a bankruptcy too. And he's sitting there now. He only has $5 million worth of debt and $200 million worth of Bitcoin.
Wow.
A very
Jeez.
interesting. Well, it's not to get into esoteric issues, but where does the court's jurisdiction end? And I mean, the
Right.
court's interest is bupkis in the scheme of things. 5 million. What is that? That's including fees.
Wow. Well, if the trustee can figure out how to liquidate that Bitcoin, then he
The,
becomes debt free and walks away with a couple of bucks.
the
That's it.
that's the guy who's holding it keeps refusing to show up for 2004 exams.
Wow.
The
Wow.
FBI is now involved. And like I said, it's going to make a great movie.
Yeah. I had a trustee once say that if the debtors don't show to a 341 to a meeting of creditors, it's the U.S. Marshals that come knocking on the door to see why they're not appearing.
Do creditors actually show up at your 341 meetings?
So sometimes the IRS will show up.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But
Sometimes,
general.
generally, no. Generally, the unsecured, the credit card companies, the student loan companies, the mortgage companies, typically they do not.
I usually say to the trustee, because before they close the case, any creditors, and they say, you plots if a creditor answered, they wouldn't know what to do. They don't show
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
And that's the thing that, the people who, lay people don't seem to understand. They may nudge you, collection agencies and attorneys, but once you file a bankruptcy, it's like you don't exist anymore.
yeah. So anyway, I do want to say thank you,
Wow.
Barry, for being a
My
guest on this
pleasure.
week's show. Yeah,
No, this was
I enjoyed talking shop.
allow the boys to do the shop talk
And,
today. So
I
this is
will send
good.
you that information about the student loans.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
absolutely. Thank you. And I do want to let people know your email address is Barry at now is it Levine S Law or is it
No,
Levine's
Levine's Law.
Law?
Levine's Law. Like
Levine's Law.
coleslaw with Levine in front of it.
There you go. So it's Barry
that's
at
you got me.
levineslaw.com. The website is also levineslaw.com. I'll put both of those in the notes. Uh,
Excellent.
Also want to tell people about our Patreon page, patreon.com/crushing debt. You can go there and help me and George avoid bankruptcy by going to the Patreon page. Um, Other than that, I think
Well,
George, we've
one of my secretaries always wanted to know all the people I'm representing to file bankruptcy, why they all drive fancy cars.
Well,
because they need to file bankruptcy. So anyway, on that note, like we say at
Take
the end of
care,
every,
gentlemen. This has been a pleasure. I enjoyed
Ab-
it.
yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you. And we hope for the listeners that you have more money at the end of the month rather than month at the end of the money. And we will talk to you in next week's episode.